Namaste. In this class, I want to focus on the importance and the role played by the tilt of the pelvis in your lunging postures. If you watch all my videos on Instagram, you may think that I'm only into really big movements, and I am. I love big movements, but it's really understanding the subtle differences in something like the pelvis that can help really deepen your yoga practice. So what we'll look at with this class is how the tilt of the pelvis in your lunging postures affects that opening and the strengthening of the hip flexors. And this is hugely beneficial for backbending postures because one of the biggest barriers to going deeper into a backbend is really tight hip flexors. So if we're using the alignment of the pelvis properly in the lunging postures that we do and other backbends, then we can really get the most out of those postures for helping towards backbends. So, it's a bit chilly in here, but I'm going to throw this shawl off now, and we'll get started in a tabletop position. So, come onto your hands and knees. Just check that your knees are aligned underneath your pelvis and your wrists are underneath your shoulders. Tops of the feet flat. Go ahead and bring a little bit of engagement to your core. I like to think of the idea that I'm pressing my abdominal muscles up into my low back. And already then, this should be giving you a nice neutral spine. So we're not getting this like dipping from any kind of like relaxed core. Nice and neutral. Then bend your elbows slightly. Begin to squeeze your shoulder blades together behind you as you lift your tailbone up and reach the top of your head towards the ceiling. Inhale here, this is your cow pose. And then as you exhale, nice and slowly, we're not in any rush, reach your tailbone down towards your knees. You can look back towards your feet. Press your front body up towards the ceiling, rounding out the back. Inhale, back into that cow pose. I like to bend my elbows here to really help me squeeze my shoulder blades together. And then exhale into the cat pose, really lifting up the abdominals up towards the low back, pressing your chest away from the mat. One more time. Inhale, nice and slow. Cow and exhale, rounding into your cat. And then coming back to that neutral position. Again, just check that the core is engaged. It's just a really good habit to keep the core engaged throughout your movements. And we're going to do the cat-cow, but just with the pelvis. So what that looks like is as we inhale, we're just lifting the tailbone up. And there might be a sensation like your sit bones are spreading wide as well. And then as you exhale, reach the tailbone down. So as you can see, it's the same movement through the cat-cow as before. We're just not doing anything with the neck or with the shoulders. It's just all in the low back and in the pelvis. So just move through this a few times, inhaling, lifting up, and exhaling, reaching the tailbone down. Just to get a feel for how much you can articulate the pelvis, just forwards and backwards. This is called anterior and posterior tilting of the pelvis, if you're interested in that. But it doesn't really matter what you call it. Just as long as you get a feel for what's happening, okay? So, a few more of those, and then if you want to, you can just add any other movements just to loosen everything up. I really like to just kind of do a little dance here and feel where maybe my body feels a bit sticky, a bit tight, so I can just work into that. So we'll just spend a couple of breaths, doing that kind of thing. So do your own thing, do whatever your body feels like doing. Alright, and then what we're going to do is come to a kneeling position on your knees. If you've got sensitive knees, you can put just a little cushion, maybe a blanket, underneath them, and you can also tuck your toes under if that feels better for you. But we're going to do the same anterior and posterior tilting of the pelvis. So just like we did in tabletop, we're just doing it here with the torso aligned with the thighs. So instead of having a flexion in the hips, now we're in this kind of neutral position for the hip flexors. So what it's going to look like, we can go with our breath, inhaling. Don't think about back bending in the upper back, try and just keep it in the low back. So what we're doing is we're tilting anteriorly the pelvis and then posteriorly tilting it. You can do that on the exhale if you like. What I like to think though, anterior tilt, posterior tilt, kind of boring. I think of this as Beyonce booty, ugly booty, right? Beyonce booty, ugly booty. Beyonce booty, maybe it looks good, but what we're really looking for is that ugly butt, where it doesn't look so flattering, but everything is engaged here, and we're really pressing, not so much the top of the butt, but it's like right down low, right where the sit bones are, kind of thinking of trying to push those sit bones out through the front of the thighs. Okay, so with this posterior tilt, ugly butt, I want you to step now your right leg forward. Keep your weight over the left knee though. Engage the glutes, engage the core, find that ugly butt position, and hold your hips as well. So this is going to help you understand if the hips start to move. And then really press the right heel down into the mat so you start to feel all of the muscles of the right leg switch on as well. So we're really, really active here, we're not relaxed. And with this, I want you to start to bend into the left knee, pulling with that left leg, your hips forward, but do not let go of the ugly butt position. So what we're looking for is really the hips to be in the same alignment in relation to the torso as they were when they're back. So they're not going back like this into our Beyonce booty. We want to keep them ugly butt. Keep the pelvis forward. So the difference is when we move forward, we're really working to stretch out the front of the left thigh now, the left hip flexors, as opposed to allowing the pelvis to tilt, which means that, yeah, we can go a little bit further down, but what happens is then the low back starts to take some of this bending, not necessarily a bad thing, but when we're trying to open up the hip flexors, then it's important to understand this tilt of the pelvis and the role that it plays. Okay, so let's just move back onto the left knee, shift your weight back onto the left knee, and again pull with the right heel digging into the mat. Pull your hips forward and down, but keep the neutral alignment of the pelvis as much as possible. One more time, just shift back, and then shift forward again. Now, without changing anything, can you just tuck that back toe under? We're going to add a little bit more of a challenge and begin to press into the left toes and lift the left knee up. Keep the back knee bent though. Here's another area where we like to just straighten that back knee, but then we get this Beyonce booty, the anterior tilt of the pelvis. So instead, bend the back knee, keep the pelvis as neutral as possible. You can keep your hands on your hips, or if you want to, you can up overhead, doesn't matter. And I want you to just hold this and breathe. Maybe you're shaking a little bit. We're probably working some muscles that maybe aren't used to being worked if you don't do this posture very often. And that's okay. If you can, with keeping the glutes engaged, keeping that alignment, you may be able to start to straighten that back knee a little bit, but just make sure that you're not straightening it by letting the pelvis tilt, but rather by opening up through the front of the left hip. One more inhale here. Exhale, lower the hands down. Now lift your right foot up off the mat as much as you can and slide it back into a plank pose. Inhale. We're going to do the same things here. So that cat-cow movement of just the pelvis here in our plank. Exhale. Find the cat position of the pelvis. So ugly butt. Inhale, Beyonce butt. Exhale, ugly butt. All right, now hold it here with your ugly butt. In this plank pose, press the mat away from you. Make sure your fingers, your hands are active. One more inhale. Exhale, lower all the way down to the mat. Nice and slow. Good. Inhale, just pick up your chest, your shoulders, your head. Keep your belly button down on the mat. And exhale, lower back down. We'll do 2 more of those. Inhale, just into this baby cobra. And exhale, lower down. Inhale, baby cobra. Exhale, lower down. Press into the mat, tuck your toes under. Lift up, downward facing dog. Maybe walk it out, whatever feels good. Get a little side stretch in there. If this is the first bit of yoga or movement that you've done today, maybe you might even want to pause the video and just work into this a bit longer. Okay, if you're ready, we'll lower the knees down, come back up into that kneeling position, and we're just going to repeat that on the other side. So nice and simple. So extend your left leg out in front, again, keeping the weight over the right knee for now. And find that engagement through the core. Engage the glutes, hands to the hips so you can understand what's happening there. Press the left heel down into the mat to switch on all of the back muscles, the leg muscles in the left leg. And then begin pulling the left heel digging into the mat. Your hips forward towards the left heel, but without losing that nice alignment of the hips. So again, you'll find that maybe you don't go as deep as you normally do if you're used to allowing your pelvis to tilt back. That's fine. Remember, we're not trying to look a certain way or reach some certain position here. What we're trying to do is understand our bodies a little bit better, understand ourselves a little bit better. And we're not going to understand ourselves if we're just trying to fit into some shape or some box that we made up in our minds. Okay, so I would encourage you, lean back again onto the right knee. I would encourage you in your classes, and then we'll shift forward. Whenever you do a yoga class, whether it's on your own at home or in a studio with a teacher, lean back onto the right knee again and then go forward again. When you go into your lunging postures, begin back here where you know that you've got a nice alignment of the hips in line with the torso, and then go forward. So bring yourself back first, find that alignment using this ugly butt sensation, pressing the sit bones forward through the front of the right thigh. Find that opening of the hip flexors. And then staying here, everything's still nice and engaged. Tuck the right toes under, and then begin to lift that right knee up. So now we're really working into these muscles in their elongated form. Hands to the hips, or if you're sure that your hips aren't gonna start opening up or anything like this, you can bring them up, and maybe you begin to straighten that right leg back behind you, but only doing so as much as you can with the pelvis still in its ugly butt alignment. All right. Couple more breaths here. Remember, if you're shaking, if you're struggling, that means you're growing. It means you're getting stronger. It's a good thing. It's not going to last forever. This is temporary, I promise. Breathe. All right, we'll take one more inhale. And then as you exhale, lower the hands down either side of the left foot. As much as you can, lift that left foot up off the mat. Ooh, and then slide it back into your plank. We're gonna just go straight into that ugly butt plank. This is how your planks really ought to look with an ugly butt. So that's keeping the glutes engaged and the core active. One more inhale here. As you exhale, keep the elbows in, lower down nice and slow. Inhale once again into a little baby cobra. And exhale, lower down. We'll do two more of those. Inhale, baby cobra. Keep your navel down. It's just the chest and the shoulders and the head. One more time. Inhale, lift up, and exhale. Lower down. Shift it all back. Tuck the toes under. One more time. Downward facing dog. Cool. So again, if you want to just stay here a bit longer, there's a pause button. If you're ready to move on, lower the knees down. Once more into this kneeling position. And we're gonna now think of our ugly butt in our camel posture. So lots of variations that you can do for your camel. I'm going to do it here with my hands on my lower back. Feel free to do that with me. If you feel good about doing it with your hands in a prayer position at your chest or maybe even up overhead, you can do that too. What we're going to do, before we even begin to move into that camel posture, find your ugly butt and engage the abdominals. Now what we're going to think about now is what's happening in relation in the space between our rib cage and our hips, okay? Because yes, this is going to open up eventually to allow for this back bend, but first I want this to open up. So begin pushing your hips forward as much as you can, thinking about pressing your sit bones forward. So we're not getting any kind of lower back bending because we're not going backwards. We're just opening up the hip flexors here. Then begin to reach your chest up, not back, up. Think of your sternum going up towards the ceiling, but keep the abdominals engaged. And then push your hips forward a little bit more, reach the chest up. Hips forward more, reach the chest up, and then you're bending in your low back, of course, but your glutes are engaged, your pelvis is holding its alignment, and then you can come back up. So I hope that this feels a little bit different for you. Maybe, hopefully it feels good for you, because what we're avoiding is just flopping back into the low back, but making sure everything stays nice and stable as we move into this back bend. Even though we are, of course, bending into the lumbar spine as we go back, we're doing it in a way where that area of the spine is very stable through this engagement of the hips and the abdominals. So we'll try that one more time. So ugly butt, push the hips forward, and also squeeze your knees together. Think about squeezing your knees together keeps the hip adductors, the inner thigh muscles switched on. And now reach the chest up. Keep exaggerating these movements. Hips forward, chest up, hips forward, chest up. Just as much as feels good for you. Keep your hands on your low back, on your pelvis, if that's where they are. And it may be that your head can drop back too. You squeeze your shoulder blades together behind you to help this feeling of opening up through the chest. It doesn't matter how far you go, but wherever you go to, I want you to be able to come back up the way that you came. Okay? Using your strength to get you back into the starting position rather than going back super far and then just getting stuck there because you let gravity pull you there. Instead, I want you to put yourself there with your own strength. Okay, so go back as far as you can where you can come back up the exact same way. I hope that you enjoyed this little lesson, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.